Okay, welcome to the video. In this video we are going to go through the full setup to install a new server 2019 and to set up the domain controller and the Active Directory and DNS on that new server. So I got my server booted up here. It's going to be a fresh install. If you are migrating or upgrading from an older version, I will be making a video on how to do that very soon, so you can wait for that. I'll have that released. But yeah, let's get back into it. So just on the install, it's pretty straightforward. You just run through the install next, install now. I'll have a point in the description where you can skip this install if you've already have Windows Server installed and you're just wanting to know how to set up the domain controller. We are going to go through this. So we want the desktop experience. I'm not going to do any command line setup for this time. Just accept and next. Custom, you want to select the drive. Again, this is a fresh server. Next. And then we just let it install. So this is going to install and then it's going to reboot a couple times. So I'll just come back after it's installed and rebooted. It's going to be at a create a password screen. Okay, it rebooted. Now it wants an administrator password. So this is the main password you'll use to log in when we set it up. So set that. So once you enter that administrator password, it's going to bring you here. You're just going to want to sign into that administrator password. It will boot up and load. And then what I usually like to do when I first boot into the server on Server Manager, I like to go to the local server. And then we're going to change the name and we're going to set it to have a static IP address. So first we'll click on the internet connection here. So mine's Ethernet 2. Right click it, properties. And then we're going to disable IP, we're going to disable IPv6 because most of the time you don't need that and it breaks a lot of things. If you have a system set up or a company set up where you need the IPv6, then you can leave that enabled and set that as a static as well. I'm not quite sure what the IP information is, so I'm going to check that real quick. So I'm just going to set it to what it is. So right now it's getting a 50.132, so I'm going to set it to a 50.132. 255.255.255.0, and then the gateway. And then for the DNS server, right now DNS is not set up. Usually we want it to point to the server. You can enter the server IP here, which is 150.132. And then I like to put Google in here until the DNS is actually set up, just so we can make sure we have internet. We hit OK and save those. So that should be assigned. Then we're going to go into the computer name and we're going to select it. Then we're going to hit change. And what I like to do is to name this what the server is. So this is a Windows 2019 server and it's going to be a domain controller. So I do Win 2019 domain controller. Now, if your company has more than one domain controller, you can always add 01, 02, 03. But for this case, we have just this one domain controller, so that's what I'm going to name it. Hit OK. Then we're going to need a restart after this. So we'll close and we'll hit restart now. Okay, that should boot up fairly quick. Then we're going to Control Alt Delete, enter our password. Server Manager will automatically open again. Then we're going to go back to local server. I like to just make sure our name got changed and our IP is static. As we can see, it is. So now let's install what we need for a domain controller. So first, now we're going to go to Manage, Add Roles and Features. Next, Role-based or feature-based installation. Next, select the server here. Next, and then we're going to select Active Directory Domain Services, Add Features. We're going to do a DNS server as well on here, Add Features. And then if you need any of these other things, you can add them as well, but I'm only going to be focusing on the Active Directory and the DNS. So we're going to do that, hit Next. There's some other things in here. If you need that, you can always tick that. Most of the time, I just hit Next. We don't have to worry about Azure AD, but if you are, then you can configure that as needed. Hit Next, Next, and then restart the destination server automatically if required. Yes. And then usually it doesn't restart, but hit Install. Then we'll let these features install. I hit Close. And now we're going to go back up to the notifications, and we're going to want to promote this server to a domain controller. So click on that. Now, if you have an existing domain controller and you're doing a migration, then these steps will be different for you. For us, we're creating a brand new domain, so we're going to hit Add a New Forest, and then the domain name. So usually this is some company.local, or maybe they want their full domain, company.com or .co or whatever it is. For me, I'm going to do test.local because this is a test setup, and then I'm going to hit Next. And then here you're going to want to just leave everything as default. But we're going to want to have to enter this directory service restore password. So you're going to want to set this, and you want to write this down and remember it just in case. Okay. Alright, now we're going to hit Next. And we can't do this create a DNS delegation yet because, well, we don't have that set up. So we're going to hit Next. It's going to do your net BIOS domain name. So usually mine will be test, or yours will be whatever before the dot. So let that load. So test. You can edit this if you want, but I wouldn't. I hit Next. And next, you leave everything default. Next, next. And it's gonna do its prerequisite check. Once it does that, we're gonna hit Install. Now we just hit Install. You can ignore these yellow flags here. You just install. This is now going to restart our computer after it installed, so you just want to close and let it just do its thing. Or it's not going to restart, it's going to sign you out. Oh, no, yep, restart. Might take a little longer to load up because now it's having to basically configure what we just installed. So okay, and now that rebooted, we're going to want to Control Alt Delete again, and we're going to see that it is now on our domain. So my domain was test.local, so we see test and then the administrator account. So let's go ahead and sign into that now. Okay. Once signed in, Server Manager will open automatically, like always. Just let it load up now. So if we now see it has our ADDS and our DNS services here, because that's what we installed and had to restart for. So if we go to local server 2, you're going to notice that we have our server on the domain now, minus test.local. The Windows Defender is changed to the domain one, obviously, and then we have a private or static IP. But now we got to make sure that our DNS is working correctly. So if we go and check our IP addresses, so if we go to our Ethernet connection again, right click, properties, IPv4, we're going to see that automatically set it to the loopback address. So this address here points to the local address, which is our server address. You can leave it as that and it worked just fine. I like to actually go in here just for my eye's sake and change it to the server address, just like that. It's just so it's easier to see. They both point to the same spot. So I hit OK on that, OK. We can exit that. So that is, the DNS is configured there. If I go to CMD and I IP config /all, you're going to see that the DNS server is the server IP. So the server is working as a DNS server now. Along with that, we have the Active Directory set up, but there's no users or groups or anything particularly set up with that. So we're going to do a quick basic setup for that. So what you're going to want to do is go to Tools, Active Directory, Users and Computers. We're going to click on our domain. And now you're going to have all the default stuff, but what I like to do now is create a folder for the company itself. So right click your domain here, New, Organizational Unit. Then you want to name this your company and hit OK. And then within your company organizational unit, you're going to want to go New. You're going to want to do another organizational unit. And we're going to call these company users. Company users is good. That's for the company users. I've seen some people, some setups where, especially with a lot of people working from home lately, is they'll have an organizational unit called remote users for the ones working at home. And then you want to create a groups as well. So we'll do a groups. Or we can do company groups. Whatever it is. I'm just going to stick with groups. Okay, and then I'm also going to actually add a administrator one as well. So administrators. Cool. So now within this, you can basically create your company. So first, for the company users, you're going to have your users. All your users are company members. That's usually everybody at the company. I'm going to get rid of this remote users because I'm not having to set that up. The way we do that, we'll have to do that another time because it has delete protection on. But we're going to make a test user. So right click inside company users, new user. We'll name this test user. The login will be user. Okay. Next, password, we'll just set a password. And then I'm going to just do password never expires. Just for this test. So now we have a test user in the company. So this user you can get signed into when you're on the domain. Now I'm going to make a group as well. And I'm going to make this group let's say I'm going to make this group remote user group. So I'm going to make it people who can remote access from home. Remote access group. And I'm going to make the test user, so his name was user. I want to make him a member of this group. And so now what we can do with this group is we can make group policies that allow this group specifically to have remote access. So that's the basic gist of it. You can create groups that allow users to do things. Groups are, it's easier to have users part of a group than just set their own group policies, because you won't have to set policies per user, but you can set it per group. So that's what I recommend doing. I usually have a second administrator on here with less permissions. Sometimes company owners like to have elevated permissions, but you don't want to give them domain admin permissions, just basic permissions. So that's a basic test setup of the Active Directory. And so now we have the Active Directory set up, we have a DNS set up, and the domain is set up. So now you're at a point where you can add your users to the domain after you create them accounts. And so, you do that by just adding them to test.local or whatever it is with their credentials. So that's a basic quick setup of how to implement a domain controller and Active Directory and DNS server on Server 2019 for the company. If you have any questions and concerns, please comment below your questions. I'll try to respond to every single one of you. Like and subscribe, and hit the bell, and I'll be releasing a lot more tutorials on networking, security, and even just basic IT tasks. So thank you for watching, and that was how you set up a domain controller.